All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time to join and learn about harmful algal blooms. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available to view later. If you registered, you'll automatically get an email with the recording and we'll post it on our Water Quality Extension YouTube channel and on our website. My name is Hope Braithwaite and I am an assistant professor for watershed quality at Utah State University. I, along with our wonderful team members here, Becca and Patrick are joining today, have the pleasure of coordinating our statewide volunteer water quality monitoring program called Utah Water Watch, as well as our HAB squad. And I'll tell you more about the HAB squad later. And then with us tonight is Hannah Bonner with the Utah Division of Water Quality. She is the Recreational Water Quality Program Coordinator. She's fantastic and knows a ton about harmful algal blooms and is a great presenter and teacher. So you're in for a treat with her. So throughout this webinar, please use the Q&A function, put any questions you have into that Q&A and we can address them at the end. If there are any tech issues or if you have other questions or things you want to throw into the chat, if we have questions for you too, you can use the chat function to answer those and to communicate that way. So we will start with an introduction to harmful algal blooms from Hannah. Then I'll provide some information about how you can get involved if you would like to monitor for HABs in Utah. We'll wrap up with the question and answer, and that will be our training for tonight. So I'll hand it over to you, Hannah. And let me stop sharing here. Cool.
Thanks, Hope. Awesome. Okay, I'm just going to share as well. Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, Hope. I'm really excited to be here. Like Hope mentioned, I'm with the Utah Division of Water Quality, which is one of the main agencies that coordinates monitoring of harmful algal blooms around the state. And for this training tonight, I really want to talk about two primary topics. First of all, just going a broad overview about harmful algal blooms. What is a harmful algal bloom? Why do they form? Why is it something we want to be thinking about? And then how to identify a harmful algal bloom when you're enjoying recreation in Utah waters. And then I'm also going to talk briefly about how you can help when it comes to both identifying harmful algal blooms and also helping protect the public and our water bodies from these types of events. So to start with, let's just talk about harmful algal blooms. And I feel like the first thing we need to lay down is what exactly I mean when I say harmful algal bloom, or also as we call them for short, a HAB. These are also known as cyanoHABs, HCBs, blue-green algae is a popular name, or toxic algae. But all of these names are actually referring to something called cyanobacteria, which is a photosynthesizing bacteria that's had a long history on this earth. So we have a lot of names, but it's all cyanobacteria. And like I said, cyanobacteria is one of the most ancient life forms we know of. We find it in the fossil record dating back to about 3.5 billion years ago. And as a species and an organism, it's actually really wonderful and an important part of our earth. It can serve as a biofuel. It fixes nutrients in our soils. It's a big help when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, cyanobacteria is the reason we're even here on the earth. It produces oxygen, and cyanobacteria was actually responsible for oxygenating the entire earth. So it's really fabulous when it's occurring in low and healthy levels in our water bodies, and it is in our water bodies. Cyanobacteria is naturally found in every water body on earth. For example, this is a photo of Utah Lake State Park Marina, right near Provo. And this photo was taken on a day when the water looks beautiful. There is low levels of cyanobacteria present. When we sampled here, we were seeing cyanobacteria in the tens of cells per milliliter concentration. But this is not a harmful algal bloom. This is healthy, great water for recreation. A few conditions take a water body like this and predispose it to become a harmful algal bloom, which is when we have unhealthy levels of cyanobacteria. And in fact, cyanobacteria comes to dominate the ecosystem. There's two main components that lead to this evolution. The first is hot temperatures. Like I said, cyanobacteria is a photosynthesizing bacteria, so it needs lots of sunny days in order to be able to grow and multiply. And as many of us from Utah are aware of, we've had a lot of hot, sunny days in the past few summers. And unfortunately, looking at this coming summer, that seems to be an ongoing trend. This is the seasonal temperature outlook for the next 3 months. And you'll see the entire state of Utah is expected to have above average temperatures. So we have a lot of hot, sunny days coming our way. The other component that cyanobacteria needs to form a harmful algal bloom is nutrient pollution. Again, this is a photosynthesizing bacteria, and so like many other plants, it needs nutrients, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, in order to grow and multiply. And nutrient pollution can be entered into our water bodies through a variety of ways. I want to highlight a few of them. First of all, we have community scale inputs to our water bodies. This could be things like our wastewater. So anything that gets flushed down a toilet, human waste is very nutrient rich. And we do process and treat that waste, but the ultimate discharge is then put into oftentimes our streams or lakes or reservoirs. And even though that water's been treated, it frequently contains elevated levels of nutrients, nutrient pollution. As well, industries will sometimes discharge wastewater that has high levels of nutrients. Stormwater has a lot of nutrients. That's when it rains and we get a lot of water running off in our cities and towns. We have many surfaces in urban areas where water cannot penetrate. And so instead it runs on those surfaces, picking up any pollutants or chemicals or nutrients, and ultimately depositing them in our water bodies. And then, of course, we have livestock and agriculture. Agriculture may be applying nutrients directly to crops or fields, which then can run off. Livestock manure is a source of nutrients. And then finally, humans' modification of the habitat, introduction of sediment from construction or road management or forestry practices, or simply developing areas that used to be riparian areas or act as buffers between development and water bodies. All of those things lead to input of nutrients into our water bodies, which again is concerning for a variety of reasons, including that it creates environments where we can have the formation of a harmful algal bloom. In addition, I just want to highlight that there's also sources of nutrient pollution that occur on more of a localized and an individual scale. Here's a few sources of nutrient pollution that you may be contributing. So lawns and yards, when there's excess fertilizer, either in a garden or on a yard or lawn, and then we have a rain event, all of that excess nutrient gets run off and ultimately will end up in our lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. As well, our personal gutters and storm drains, if they get clogged with grass clippings, leaves, other organic material, that also is going to introduce nutrients. Septic systems are a big one. About 1 in 5 residents of the US either relies on an on-site or small cluster septic system. And when those systems are not properly maintained, they can actually leach human waste and sewage into nearby water bodies. And little things, many detergents and soaps, particularly dishwasher detergent, have phosphorus in them. And so that's another source of nutrients being washed down the drain. And then, of course, pet waste. When we're not picking up from our dogs and we're recreating near water body, again, we're placing those nutrients in the water. And like I said, that's what harmful algal blooms need to form. They have this big input of generally human-caused nutrients combined with hot summer temperatures, and you get a harmful algal bloom. This photo was taken in the exact same site as the previous photo, but you can see that now we have a harmful algal bloom formed. These green clumps on the surface are actually visible cyanobacteria colonies. And when we sampled this water, we were seeing cyanobacteria in the millions of cells per milliliter. So cyanobacteria has literally taken over this system and now is dominating, crowding out other beneficial species. And we don't want these kind of events to happen for a few reasons. First, like I said, when we have a harmful algal bloom occur, cyanobacteria is really disrupting the natural ecosystem. It's crowding out other species we care about, and oftentimes can cause things like fish kills. As well, there's a lot of human and animal health effects from harmful algal blooms from two different reasons. First of all, these are bacteria, and so simply being exposed to high concentrations of cyanobacteria can make you sick. Usually this results in gastrointestinal illness, so things like vomiting, nausea, diarrhea. And then even more concerning is that many species of cyanobacteria produce potent toxins as part of their life cycle. And if these toxins are ingested, so you accidentally swallow some water while splashing around, water gets in your mouth as you're jet skiing or water skiing, your dog drinks the water, your kid puts some water in their mouth, that kind of exposure, if there's cyanobacteria produced toxins in that water, that could have health effects, anything from a headache to a stomach ache to permanent organ damage to death. So some very severe health consequences from these cyanotoxins that we don't like to see and that we worry about. And then the third reason harmful algal blooms are concerning is that because of these first two reasons, they also have major impacts on our economies and our recreation. People don't want to be recreating on water that has a harmful algal bloom, which is a loss for everyone involved. So we don't want harmful algal blooms to occur in this state, but we do want to be aware of when they're happening for these reasons. And unfortunately, needing to look for these events, looking for them is becoming more and more of a common concern. This figure shows the cumulative number of Utah water bodies that have experienced a harmful algal bloom in the last 5 years. And as you can see, we're seeing these kind of events occurring at more and more of our water bodies, with over 50 harmful algal blooms, 50 water bodies being affected by harmful algal blooms as of last summer, and that number expected to rise with this coming year. So this is an issue that's not going away, that's not going to get better on its own, and that we really need to think about and address, especially as we're putting more and more nutrient pollution into our water bodies. So what do you do as a Utahn who likes to enjoy Utah waters? This doesn't mean you can't enjoy Utah waters or you can't recreate, but it does mean that you need to know some things to be able to safely recreate and to help protect and preserve these waters. So I put a number of best practices up here, and hope we'll also be touching on some of these points later. But the first one I want to talk about is using the website habs.utah.gov. This is our state website where we bring together data collected by numerous partner agencies around the state, and we actually give people a preview about what water quality might look like at a water body you recreate on. I'm going to stop presenting for just a second and actually show you. I've pulled up habs.utah.gov right here. So you can see this site has a lot of information about harmful algal blooms, about other water quality issues. You can learn more about harmful algal blooms and how to help prevent them, more about what we're doing to monitor for these. And then as well, you can check current conditions on water bodies all throughout the state. You can see them listed here or on this interactive map. So before you recreate, say you wanted to go to Willard Bay, before you leave your house, you can take a look at water body conditions and say, oh, wow, there actually has been some harmful algae spotted at the pond at Willard Bay, and adjust your recreation decisions accordingly. This is an awesome resource that we definitely recommend you use and share so that you can make informed recreation decisions. As well, there's a lot of water bodies in the state, and these harmful algal blooms can appear rapidly. So there also is a lot of value in knowing how to spot harmful algae. And we're going to go over this in a little bit more detail later, but just checking before you let yourself or your kids or your dog into a water body is really great. And then, of course, if you see anything that looks like a harmful algal bloom, avoid making contact with it. Don't swim in water that has an algae bloom. Don't let your children or your pets interact with that water. And don't do anything that could incidentally allow water to get in your body in areas affected by these blooms. And then as well, Hope's going to talk about this a little bit later, but if you are seeing a harmful algal bloom at a water body that's not on our website, we want to know and to respond. And so we have this 24-hour hotline, and also through the HAB squad, we're able to use citizen scientists to be able to quickly follow up with reports. So on that note, let's talk a little bit more about how to even identify a harmful algal bloom in the first place. I'm going to show you a series of photos, and I want your feedback on whether or not you think what I'm showing you is a harmful algal bloom. And as we go through this, I'm going to teach you a few principles about how to quickly and easily identify potentially cyanobacteria in a water body. So we're going to start with this image. I want you to take a look at this and think whether or not this is a harmful algal bloom. And if you think it is, throw in the chat yes. If you think it's not a harmful algal bloom, put in the chat no. And I'll take a look at your responses. Okay, wow, we're all yeses. Excellent. You guys are doing great. Correct. This is a harmful algal bloom, and there's some pretty signature evidence that's the case. First of all, this color, cyanobacteria specifically can release a really blue cyan pigment when the cells die, which oftentimes gives it this characteristic blue-green color. You can also see there's almost these spilled paint-like stripes. This is another texture that really is characteristic of cyanobacteria. And also you can tell this is just a thin scum that's coating the surface of the water and is also dispersed throughout the water column. So this is definitely a harmful algal bloom. You should not get in water that looks like this. Okay, next image. This is two different perspectives on the same water body. What do you think? Is this a harmful algal bloom? Put yes in the chat. It's not a harmful algal bloom. Put no in the chat. Okay, we are having some split responses. I'm seeing some yeses and some nos. This is a tricky one. This actually also is a harmful algal bloom. It looks very different from that first image, but that's because there's a lot of different species of cyanobacteria. And another very characteristic way that cyanobacteria can appear is in these thin filamentous strips that almost look like someone mowed their lawn and then dumped the bag of grass clippings into the water body. So if you see anything like this, and you know these are pretty dramatic examples where you have lots of that clumping material on the surface. Other times it can be a little bit more subtle, where you just see these grass clipping like strands floating and submerged in the water body. But if you see anything like that, it's unless there's someone mowing their lawn and dumping grass clippings in the water, it almost certainly is cyanobacteria. And again, you don't want to recreate in that area. Okay, let's do another one. So here's what this water body looks like from a distance. Here's what it looks like up close. Is this a harmful algal bloom? Say yes in the chat if you think it is, no in the chat if you think it isn't. Okay, wow, yeah, we're getting resounding no's, exactly. And you know, it's pretty obvious this is not cyanobacteria when we have this close-up picture, a little less obvious from a distance. This is actually called the duckweed, and it commonly, especially from a distance, is mistaken as a harmful algal bloom. It's pretty easy though to distinguish the difference, and that simply is by taking a closer look and asking, does what I see have roots or leaves? If you look up close and are seeing leaves or roots, it is definitely not cyanobacteria. It's not a harmful algal bloom, and you are safe to recreate. Okay, let's do a few more. This photo is actually hot off the press. Was taken at Manaway Reservoir just on Monday of this week. Again, we have a far out picture and a close up. Is this a harmful algal bloom? Yes, if you think it is. No, if you think it's not. I can tell it's a little trickier. We have some slower responses. Looks like mostly yeses. You guys are great. You've got it now. And this is a tricky one. Just by looking at it, you might not know for sure. And we're going to talk about in just a minute a strategy you could use to confirm. But this is a harmful algal bloom. This is cyanobacteria. You can see it's a green color. You get some of that paint-like texture on the surface. You can tell it's both the surface scum and in the water column. And yeah, this is a harmful algal bloom, and you would not want to get in this water. Okay, let's do one more, and then we're going to introduce one more tool to differentiate. So this is actually a series of photos sent into the Division of Water Quality of Grantsville Reservoir. You can see more of the shoreline picture and a close-up picture. Is this a harmful algal bloom? Yes. Is it not? No. Oops. Ooh, wow. Okay, we have an expert cyanobacteria identifying audience in the webinar tonight. They've got it. So I'm seeing a lot of no's, and you're absolutely right. I will say to most people who just have a vague idea that harmful algal blooms exist, they might be really concerned by this. It looks green and nasty and scummy, but this is yet another harmful algal bloom lookalike. And the way we could tell for sure is by performing something called the stick test that I'm going to play a video of at this very same site. The stick test, as the name suggests, is conducted by finding a stick and actually dipping it into the observed growth and looking really carefully at the texture of what you're seeing. And what you're specifically looking for is to see if there's a fibrous, a filamentous, a hair-like texture present. As you're seeing in the video, there was all of those little stringies that would hang off the growth they're pulling out, very fibrous and hair-like, which actually indicates this is not cyanobacteria, but one of our most nefarious cyanobacteria lookalikes, filamentous green algae. Happily, filamentous green algae is not toxic, is not harmful, and is okay to recreate when that's present. And so conducting the stick test, again, here's a few more dramatic examples for this hair-like fibrous texture is a great way to identify if what you're seeing is filamentous green algae. If you see that hair-like texture, it's not cyanobacteria, and you are good to go ahead and recreate. And in fact, one of the best ways to identify whether or not something weird and colorful you're seeing in a water body is a harmful algal bloom is to rule out those two common imposters. If you're seeing something strange in water, check. And if it's not duckweed and it's not filamentous green algae, then it's usually safest practice to assume it is a harmful algal bloom and to avoid coming in contact with it. A pretty easy, quick test that you can do anytime you visit a water body in just a few minutes. I do want to add one more addendum to this. Thus far, the pictures I've shown you have all been planktonic harmful algal blooms. And what I mean by that is they're harmful algal blooms that are dispersed throughout the water. So oftentimes we see a scum accumulating on the surface, but the cyanobacteria is also present and free floating all throughout the lake or reservoir. This is the kind of harmful algal bloom we see most often in Utah, and in the past has caused us the most concern for human health and recreation. But we actually have two flavors of harmful algal bloom in Utah. And this second flavor, benthic harmful algal blooms, seem to be becoming more and more common and be occurring in more and more places around the state. These benthic harmful algal blooms, very differently, actually grow on the bottom of our water bodies, and they form these mats or carpets in a variety of colors and textures. They actually seem to prefer flowing water, and so you're more likely to see them in rivers or streams, but again, they can also still occur in our lakes and rivers. And just like the planktonic cyanobacteria, they also have the ability to produce dangerous toxins. So I just want to give you a preview too of what these might look like. Here are some benthic cyanobacteria, a benthic harmful algal bloom in a hot spring area. This is at Fifth Water Hot Springs up Spanish Fork Canyon. And you can see, again, that really characteristic blue-green color in this photograph with the glove. You will see it almost looks fibrous when you just look at it from a distance. But as you can see, the scientist has pulled it apart and they're seeing a very glob-like texture. It's not having that hair-like texture. So again, a stick test can be really helpful here. Here's another appearance. These species can also sometimes be brown or tan. So this really veiny textured material growing on a rock in Dinosaur National Monument is also a benthic species of cyanobacteria. And then just here's one more example that we found in a lake. This is up at McClellan Lake in the Payson Lakes area. And this one is extra tricky because we actually do have some filamentous green algae. That's this more yellow green material. But then hidden amongst it is this darker forest green material that is that benthic cyanobacteria. So, this stuff would not be a problem to touch or recreate in, but you would want to avoid this stuff because it could be quite toxic, and generally is most dangerous when you actually come in contact with it, or when kids or dogs in particular might consume it. But luckily, those same rules work. If you see something gooey and icky and blue, green, or tannish, check. Is it duckweed? Does it have roots or leaves? Do the stick test. Is it fibrous? Does it have a hair-like texture? If the answer to both of those are no, and it instead is a mat with a very mucousy-like texture, again, the safest thing is to assume that it is harmful algae and to avoid contact with that area of the water body. So there you have it. That was a very rapid, but I think this is a pretty basic principles that you can apply anytime you're recreating in Utah's waters. Which is great because, like I mentioned earlier, we need the public's help. We do have a really rigorous monitoring program in place, but we can't get to all of these water bodies all of the time. Just to give you a general overview about what the state and partners are doing to respond to these harmful algal blooms, is we have this continuous process that occurs every summer, May through October. First of all, we've worked with our partners to identify priority sites for monitoring. These are water bodies with a known history of harmful algal blooms and frequent recreational use. And so we're visiting these water bodies on a regular, generally a monthly basis, looking for evidence of a harmful algal bloom. If we are seeing a bloom forming, we start to visit more frequently and can use samples to actually issue health advisories if we think it could be a risk to human or animal health. We work with our local health departments to put those advisories into place, and those advisories include things like signage and website updates. You might have seen these advisories if you've been recreating at some of our monitored water bodies. These are posted on site. Here's an example of our new and improved sign for 2023. And as you'll see, it gives people a good sense of what sort of activities they should and shouldn't do in a water body affected by a harmful algal bloom. And then, like I mentioned, and almost like we looked at in our example, we're also posting this immediately on our website. So you can see we just visited Willard Bay on Monday. We saw harmful algae. And so that information was up on the very same day so that people could make safe recreational decisions. So again, one more shout out for that website, habs.utah.gov, so you can keep abreast of everything going on in the recreational water quality world. And then just for your reference, here's about the 20 sites that we are regularly monitoring. So these are the ones we're visiting monthly to weekly. And then we have partners looking at a number of other water bodies. And we're also available to respond if issues are reported to us at other locations around the state. And this is great. Our program has expanded quite a bit and had a lot of success. But like I mentioned, there's many, many more water bodies in the state that can be affected by harmful algal blooms, particularly as we keep having hot summers and as we keep inputting nutrient pollution. And so it's very likely that additional water bodies that we're not monitoring or we're not currently aware of may have a bloom, which is where people like you come in. So this is really my final pitch is we need your help in two different ways. The first is that we don't want these blooms to occur at all if possible. But the only thing that's going to accomplish that is concerted individual and community efforts to reduce nutrient pollution. And so there's some really important ways that you can help with this. The first is through your own behaviors, doing things like cleaning up your animal waste, reducing nutrient in runoff. So that's using tools like storm barriers or permeable surfaces, creating buffers around water bodies that might be adjacent to your property, keeping your storm drain and gutters clean, not dumping or leaving grass clippings or leaves in your yard. And then choosing phosphorus-free products whenever possible for soaps, for fertilizers. If you do choose to apply fertilizer to a garden or a lawn, using the minimum recommended amount, not over-fertilizing. If you're on a septic system, maintaining that regularly. And then equally important, being involved with your community and making sure that you're advocating for reductions in nutrient pollution and community scale improvements. Second, on top of that, while we're enacting this longer term change of preventing harmful algal blooms, we also need to respond to the risk they pose now. And we need your help for this as well. We need people who are familiar with harmful algal blooms, who can identify them, and who can help educate their friends, their family, their neighbors about these kind of events. So just attending this webinar, learning this information is a huge start, and so grateful that you're here doing this. I would add on top of it, keep learning how to recognize harmful algal blooms. You can find more photos on our website, habs.utah.gov, so you can keep sharp. And you can also stay familiar with our resources and water body conditions on that website. As well, we would love your help reporting potential harmful algal blooms. This is something you can do informally if you ever recreate at a water body and you're seeing something suspicious. And it also is something you can do in a more formal setting, working with our harmful algal bloom squad, our HAB squad, which is what Hope is going to talk about in a few minutes. Just to back up everything she says, our HAB squad volunteers are awesome and a huge help in both helping us to keep the public safe and protect them, and also in better understanding the pattern and trends affecting our water bodies. And on that note, I think the last thing is just sharing what you know. And again, our goal is not to stop recreation, but really to enable safe and healthy recreation, and then mobilize the people and the passion and the education we need to stop these events from happening in the first place. So without any more ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Hope. And then I'm also happy to answer any questions, either directly in this webinar, or I put it in my email, hbonner@utah.gov, and you're also welcome to reach out to me directly. Thanks, Hope.
Great. Thank you so much, Hannah. That was fantastic. Okay, so again, I'm Hope Braithwaite with Utah State University. The Utah HAB Squad is such an awesome partnership between USU and the Utah Division of Water Quality with Hannah, and it really wouldn't be possible without our amazing volunteers. So huge thank you if you are a current volunteer with the HAB Squad or with Utah Water Watch, or both. That's even more amazing if you can do both of them. Or if you're watching this because you're interested in joining. I'll go through monitoring and what joining the harmful algal bloom squad actually entails now. So Utah Water Watch is our water quality volunteer monitoring program, and it was started in 2012. Since then, we've had hundreds of volunteers monitor hundreds of different sites all across the state. These are lakes, rivers, streams, reservoirs, and then all of that data is publicly available on the citsci.org database, and I can touch more on that later too. And then we have our Utah HAB Squad. So this is a more recent development. It's specifically monitoring for harmful algal blooms, like Hannah so wonderfully described and helped us with understanding the identification and kind of what's going on with harmful algal blooms, especially in Utah. And so this program was started in 2021, and we asked volunteers to commit to a weekly or every other week monitoring at these priority sites that we're really watching for harmful algal blooms. And so you can be involved in one or both of these efforts, whatever works best for you. So a little bit of safety first. Cyanobacteria can produce toxins that can be harmful to us, pets, livestock, other animals, the fish kills like Hannah mentioned. So you do not need to touch the water to monitor for these blooms as part of the HAB squad. We do have some safety guidelines you can follow when you do suspect a bloom. So if you're looking at it and you think, okay, this doesn't meet the filamentous or duckweed identification cues that we usually use. And so this is when you want to make sure that you're not ingesting the water and not coming into contact with it with exposed skin. Hannah had a great picture of one of the benthic blooms, and the person had a glove on. So we really want to make sure that we are not coming in direct contact with that water. And then also avoiding inhaling the spray that's caused by boats, wind, or other surface water disturbances. If those conditions are present, then we encourage you to wear a mask so that you can avoid inhaling the water and the spray and those airborne particles that way. And then also just encourage you to, after you're done monitoring, make sure that you wash your hands with soap and water before you're eating and drinking. So just really want to make sure that we're all staying safe when it comes to these cyanobacteria and the toxins that they can produce. So how to monitor for harmful algal blooms. You've learned a lot from Hannah on how to identify HABs, and I'll do a little bit of a refresher here, but we do have instructions available on our website and that we'll email you if you do decide to volunteer. So we ask that you monitor weekly or every other week at these priority sites. And so we also recognize that you are volunteering if you decide to volunteer, and summers can be a really busy time. If you think, hey, I can monitor weekly or every other week, but I have this one family vacation or I have this other circumstance, we understand that's completely fine. So as long as for the most part you can monitor weekly or every other week, we would love to have you join and help document these harmful algal blooms. So when you visit your sites, you'll record the presence or absence of a possible HAB. And that's really important in both cases if you are seeing signs of a potential harmful algal bloom, and then also if you're not seeing any sign. And we'll go through some of those telltale signs, and Hannah did a great job of kind of talking about the spilled paint and all of these signs that we kind of use as those major big telltale signs of a bloom. So if you're not seeing that, that's also really important information for us to know. And then you will upload your data to the citsci.org website. So Hannah did a great job of explaining the stick test. If it sticks to a stick, it's probably filamentous algae. Here's some examples of cyanobacteria, some blooms. And I just wanted to go over a couple of these just as a refresher too. The grass clippings, that was a perfect example that Hannah shared. Please do not be like the person in the photo on this slide who has their hand just exposed in that water. We want you to, you do not need to touch the water to monitor. You can just take photos for this. There's no reason for you to be in that water, but it does help you kind of see what that grass clipping can look like. And then we have the spilled paint. This can be a lot of different colors. So there can be pinks, purples, blues, just really vibrant colors that you would think that doesn't look like a normal water body. The green scum, a really bright green color. There's this dispersed pea soup, so that actually looks like it's pea soup throughout the whole entire water column. Those clumps or globules, green mats, and then kind of that interesting blue-green residue or a few other ones. And conditions can change quickly. That's also why we're asking you to monitor so frequently. So you can keep an eye out there. There could be no bloom 1 week, and then the next week that you go, you could actually find something that's quite obvious as a bloom. So if you do suspect a harmful algal bloom, these are the steps to follow. So first and foremost, if you're pretty sure that this is a bloom, go ahead and call that environmental incidents line, contact Utah Water Watch, contact us by phone or email, and I'll have all of our contact information at the end of this so that you can alert us of the potential HAB, and we can coordinate with you and the Division of Water Quality on that. Also, if you're kind of unsure, if you're thinking, I feel like this is probably a bloom, but I'm not totally sure and don't quite feel comfortable calling the hotline, you're always welcome to email us those photos and say, I think I may be seeing a bloom here, but could you do a double check? And we are happy to take a look at those photos. But if you are pretty confident and feel like, yes, I nailed Hannah's quiz at the very start of this, so I'm confident and want to go ahead and call, the quicker we can respond, the better. And then after that, uploading your data into the harmful algal bloom cyanobacteria data sheet in CITSI as soon as you can. And then if you can, returning to that water body and that site daily or as often as you can to take photos and upload them to CITSI. If it's not feasible for you to go every day, that's completely understandable, but as often as you can to kind of keep an eye on it would be really helpful. And then check that habs.utah.gov website that Hannah brought up for those updates and most current conditions. That's where you can see where the advisories are, if there's a health watch, if there's a advisory, kind of whatever the status is for that water body, as well as other water bodies if you're wanting to go recreate. That's a wonderful resource to go and check. And again, it's really important that we collect the data on where we're seeing these harmful algal blooms, and then also if we're not seeing any sign of a harmful algal bloom. So I just wanted to give a few examples from last season of volunteers helping document these HABs. So in early August, Hannah reached out to me and asked if there was a volunteer monitoring at Panguitch Lake. Hannah uses satellite imagery to detect some blooms and areas where she thinks there might be a bloom happening soon. And so she was concerned about Panguitch Lake after looking at that satellite imagery and wanted to get some eyes on the ground there. And so I told her that yes, there were volunteers that were monitoring at that site. And in full disclosure, one of them is my mom. We have the same unique last name, so it's kind of easy to tell. She's in that picture there. So Arlene and Lara were able to get out and monitor and take photos. And just based on the photos that they sent in, the Division of Water Quality worked with the local health department, and then the local health department issued a health watch, and that was just based on those photos. When the Division of Water Quality was able to get out and monitor, they got an exact identification and count of the cyanotoxins, and then they moved it to an advisory. And so it's just really, really helpful and important to have that coordination between all of us. On the right, we have photos from Peggy, another volunteer. So Peggy found a harmful algal bloom at Highland Glen Reservoir. And so in this case, she sent in photos, and then again, based on those photos, the same thing happened where there was a health watch issued because we had those photos. The Division of Water Quality and the health department were able to issue that just based on those photos. And then later, once the Division of Water Quality was able to monitor and get an exact count and see what things look like, the local health department issued a warning advisory. And even though the HAB squad has only been going on these last few years, Utah Water Watch volunteers are also looking for harmful algal blooms, even if it's just monthly monitoring. And since I started in 2019 and started coordinating Utah Water Watch from that time, from getting a photo of a harmful algal bloom from a volunteer to actually seeing a health watch or advisory be posted. It's always been within 2 days, and usually it's the same day or the next day, which is really remarkable, especially think of all of the people and coordinating that's involved. So that's volunteers, that's Utah State University, Division of Water Quality, local health departments. And so I think it's just an amazing example of what we can do as a team and when we all come together and work together. And it's really important to get that information out quickly, especially in areas where people are recreating and we are concerned about those blooms. And here again is an example from that website that Hannah was showing. So you can see that there was a health watch issued, and then the volunteer is given credit there as well. So if this is something that you are actually interested in doing, here's a little checklist of how to join the Utah HAB Squad, filling out a Google form. So just on our website, there's a registration form. So filling out that Google form, so we have your contact information and all of that good stuff. Attending this training or watching this webinar after the fact is the real training for harmful algal bloom monitoring. And then on our website, we have a map with all of the priority sites. And I'll show that at the end of this, so you can see the available sites and where folks are already monitoring. And so you can check that map and see where if there's a location that you can easily access and would like to help us monitor. So then you'll email us your preferred sites. We'll send you a liability form to sign, your own HAB Squad kit, which is essentially clipboard data sheets, and we give you a awesome HAB Squad membership card. And then you are ready to actually get out and monitor, make sure you upload your data. And there's instructions on our website too on how to make an account with citsci.org. You'll upload your data there. And then throughout this whole thing, just make sure that if you have any questions, we are more than happy to answer them. And you can see our contact information right here. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help answer any questions that you have. And I'm going to just show that website really quick. So here's our main HAB Squad website. Here's their volunteer registration. If you scroll down, here's our monitoring map. So you can see all of the available sites, the active sites. It's based on if it's a stream or lake site. So you can see there's a lot of purple and blue right now, so lots of available sites that we'd love to have people monitoring. We have the instructions that you can find here, the data sheets, all of that good information is all available right on our website. And then this is what the data sheet looks like on citsci.org too. So hopefully that's a helpful way to see how to actually get involved. And thank you again to Hannah for joining us this evening. We're happy to take any questions, and I'll stop the recording there.